On November 24, 1971, a man in a business suit walked onto Northwest Orient Flight 305, carrying a briefcase and a paper bag. 45 minutes later, he would jump from the aircraft with $200,000 strapped to his body and disappear into the stormy Pacific Northwest night. According to FBI records, this case would become the longest-running investigation in the agency's history. The man gave his name as Dan Cooper, though media reports later incorrectly called him D.B. Cooper. He wore a black tie, white shirt, and appeared to be a typical businessman traveling on the day before Thanksgiving. What happened next would create the only unsolved commercial aircraft piracy case in American aviation history. Federal investigators have pursued over 1,000 suspects and conducted countless interviews across 5 decades. They have analyzed parachutes, examined currency fragments, and followed leads from the Canadian border to Mexico. Yet despite this massive effort, documented in thousands of pages of FBI files, one question remains unanswered. Who was the man who called himself Dan Cooper? According to witness statements collected by the FBI, the man who would become known as D.B. Cooper appeared to be in his mid-40s, stood approximately 6 feet tall, and weighed around 170 pounds. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner, who served him during the flight, later described him to investigators as polite, calm, and well-dressed. Court documents from the subsequent investigation revealed that Cooper ordered bourbon and soda, paid his fare in cash, and carried what appeared to be a standard business briefcase. The year 1971 marked a particularly volatile period for American aviation security. FBI crime statistics show that commercial aircraft hijackings had reached epidemic proportions, with over 40 incidents occurring in the United States that year alone. Most hijackers, according to federal aviation records, sought passage to Cuba or demanded the release of political prisoners. Airport security procedures during this era were minimal by today's standards. Passengers underwent no baggage screening, and metal detectors were not yet standard equipment at American airports. The Federal Aviation Administration had only recently begun implementing basic security measures following a series of high-profile hijacking incidents throughout the late 1960s. Northwest Orient Flight 305 was a regularly scheduled domestic service, operating a Boeing 727-100 aircraft between Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. On that Thanksgiving Eve, the flight carried 36 passengers and a crew of 6, according to airline manifest records preserved in federal archives. The aircraft itself represented the latest in commercial aviation technology, featuring aft-mounted engines and a unique rear stairway that could be lowered during flight. According to Florence Schaffner's sworn statement to federal investigators, the sequence of events began approximately 30 minutes after takeoff from Portland International Airport. Cooper handed her a note claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. When Schaffner initially dismissed the note as a common prank, Cooper quietly insisted she read it carefully. FBI interview transcripts record that Cooper then opened his briefcase slightly, revealing what appeared to be dynamite, wires, and a battery. Schaffner immediately informed Captain William Scott and First Officer William Ratajak in the cockpit. Air traffic control recordings from Seattle Center, preserved in National Archives, document the crew's coded communications with ground control as they declared an emergency. Cooper's demands, as recorded in FBI case files, were specific and calculated. He requested $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and fuel trucks standing by in Seattle for refueling. The amount, investigators later noted, represented approximately $1.4 million in today's currency. Federal Aviation Administration incident reports show that Cooper remained calm throughout the 45-minute flight to Seattle, even ordering another bourbon and soda while negotiations proceeded on the ground. Upon landing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, FBI surveillance teams watched as Cooper allowed all 36 passengers to disembark safely after receiving the money and parachutes. Witness statements indicate he examined the parachutes carefully, selecting a military-issued back parachute and discarding the others. Airport ground crews, working under FBI supervision, refueled the aircraft while Cooper directed the flight crew to configure the plane for low-speed flight. He specified exact parameters: landing gear down, wing flaps lowered to 15 degrees, and airspeed not to exceed 200 knots. Federal Bureau of Investigation records show that agents launched what would become known as NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking, within hours of Cooper's jump. The investigation, according to FBI case files, initially focused on the flight path and weather conditions over southwestern Washington state. National Weather Service data from November 24, 1971, documented severe thunderstorms, freezing rain, and winds exceeding 35 miles per hour in the projected landing zone. Air Force survival experts, consulted by investigators, calculated that Cooper jumped into near-freezing temperatures, wearing only a business suit and thin raincoat. The FBI's evidence collection efforts, detailed in thousands of pages of investigative reports, began immediately after the aircraft landed in Reno, Nevada. Agents processed the entire cabin for fingerprints, recovering several partial prints from Cooper's seat and the bourbon glass he used. Laboratory analysis of these prints, however, failed to match any individual in federal criminal databases. Investigators also collected microscopic evidence, including hair samples and fabric fibers, which were preserved for future analysis using advancing forensic techniques. The parachute evidence proved particularly significant to federal investigators. Cooper had selected a military surplus parachute rather than the sport parachutes also provided, suggesting possible military training or skydiving experience. However, he also chose a training parachute that could not be steered, indicating potential inexperience with modern equipment. FBI behavioral analysts, working with aviation experts, developed psychological profiles suggesting Cooper possessed detailed knowledge of Boeing 727 aircraft systems and commercial aviation procedures. The investigation expanded dramatically in 1980, when an 8-year-old boy found deteriorating $20 bills along the Columbia River, approximately 20 miles from Cooper's estimated jump zone. Laboratory analysis confirmed these bills matched serial numbers from the ransom money, representing the only verified physical evidence recovered from the case. Forensic examination revealed the bills had been exposed to natural elements for several years, though scientists could not determine whether they had been buried or submerged. The FBI pursued over 800 suspects during the active investigation phase, including Richard Floyd McCoy, who executed a similar hijacking 4 months later, and Skip Porteous, a former military parachutist. Each suspect was eliminated through fingerprint analysis, DNA testing, or credible alibis documented in case file. On July 8, 2016, the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially announced the suspension of active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case, though agents emphasized the case would remain open to credible physical evidence. FBI Assistant Director in charge Greg Bretzing stated in press releases that the agency had exhausted all logical investigative leads and would redirect resources to other priorities. The decision, documented in federal case files, came after 45 years of investigation involving hundreds of agents across multiple field offices. During this period, investigators analyzed over 1,000 tips, pursued hundreds of suspects, and conducted extensive searches across the Pacific Northwest. The case generated significant changes in American aviation security procedures. Federal Aviation Administration regulations implemented in response to the Cooper hijacking and similar incidents mandated that Boeing 727 aircraft be equipped with Cooper vanes, devices that prevent the aft stairs from being lowered during flight. Airlines also implemented comprehensive passenger screening, baggage inspection, and armed federal air marshals on commercial flights. Despite decades of investigation, Cooper's true identity remains unknown. DNA analysis of evidence collected from the aircraft, conducted using modern forensic techniques, failed to produce matches in federal databases. The partial fingerprints recovered from Cooper's seat and drinking glass likewise yielded no identification. Of the original $200,000 ransom, only $5,800 has ever been recovered, consisting of the deteriorating bills found along the Columbia River in 1980. The remaining $194,200 has never been located despite extensive ground searches using metal detectors and aerial surveillance. Weather analysis and survival expert assessments suggest Cooper likely died during or shortly after his nighttime parachute jump into the harsh Pacific Northwest wilderness. However, investigators acknowledge in case documentation that no body, parachute, or additional evidence has ever been found to confirm this theory. The D.B. Cooper case represents more than an unsolved crime. It marks a pivotal moment in American aviation history when commercial air travel transformed from a relatively open system to the heavily secured industry we know today. Federal aviation security measures implemented in response to Cooper's hijacking and similar incidents during the early 1970s established protocols that remain standard practice in modern commercial aviation. The case also demonstrated the limits of criminal investigation technology during the pre-digital era, when fingerprint databases were limited and DNA analysis was decades away from development. Modern forensic scientists continue to analyze evidence from the Cooper case using advanced techniques unavailable to 1970s investigators. In recent years, researchers have applied new methods to examine the deteriorated currency found along the Columbia River, seeking microscopic evidence that might reveal Cooper's fate or identity. The enduring fascination with D.B. Cooper reflects broader cultural questions about crime, punishment, and the possibility of the perfect heist. Unlike violent criminals who harm innocent people, Cooper is remembered by many as a polite gentleman who committed a victimless crime and disappeared into legend. This perception, while romanticizing criminal behavior, demonstrates how unsolved mysteries capture public imagination across generations. The Cooper case files, maintained in FBI archives, continue to receive public attention through Freedom of Information Act requests and amateur investigators who propose new theories and suspects. What aspects of this case do you find most intriguing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more documented stories from the world of unsolved crimes. This content is based on publicly available FBI case files, court records, and official government investigations.